Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by Next Gen Purpose, hosted by me, Justine Reichman. Every Tuesday, we serve up thoughtful conversations with founders, sustainability leaders, and community organizers who share their stories and missions within the regenerative food sphere. It's all about boosting forward-thinking folks and brands working to make better for you and better for the planet food more accessible. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today is Marika Messager. Messager? Is that right?
Yes, Messager.
Oh, Messager, who is a teacher of consciousness and the founder of consciousleadership.org. Welcome, Marika.
Thank you, Justine. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Likewise, I'm super excited to have this conversation and learn a little bit about what you teach. And before we get started, I'd love for you to just explain to the people viewing and listening what it means when you say I'm a teacher of consciousness.
Yeah, sure. It's a question that a lot of people do ask. So I'm a researcher and a teacher in consciousness. And what I mean by that is really researching all the ways in which we are not conscious. In other ways, all the ways in which we are being operated by our unconscious mind. So we don't really have control over our choices or our reactions, because they do come from a program that has been instilled onto us by our parents, our society, our culture, our religion. So consciousness is really unpeeling all these layers so that we can find what is true and what is healthy. So, researching consciousness really means researching all the unhealthy, distorted, or toxic behaviors that we display as individuals or organizations or as a system, and understanding what's the root cause of those behaviors and where do they come from, so that we can, once we are conscious of them, have the ability to transform ourselves, which is the leadership bit, so that we actually display healthy behaviors, with our families, with our friends, in our professional circles. And eventually, the more conscious leader you become, the more you become interested in creating systemic change and in taking part of actually creating a system that is healthier for all of us.
That sounds amazing. Everyone should, I mean, I want to do this. Everyone should want to do this, because I think very positive. It allows us to make mindful choices, what we're doing, and understand why we're doing them, create change based on what we learn. And from what you're saying, I mean, on a personal and professional level, it's really important to understand what you're doing and the impact it's having, because if you can create change, then you can create change, as you said, systemically, but it's got to start somewhere, right? Yeah. So with that in mind, as the founder of a company, right, and we're talking to other founders, we're talking to other leaders in the industry, where do they start this journey?
Well, actually, especially if you're a founder and an entrepreneur, that dimension of self-leadership. By the way, we don't need a title to, display leadership. But that element of self-leadership, which is one of the dimensions of conscious leadership, is crucial, because you want to be able to be at your best, mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually, because your company is you. So, if you're not functioning at your best, your company is not performing at its best. So it's even more crucial when, you are an entrepreneur. And where do you start? Well, I would say, start with looking at all the behaviors that you are not so proud of. All those bits and pieces when you know that when you're acting or speaking a certain way or even thinking a certain way, you're not feeling great about yourself, right? And start to unpack, can I identify some patterns? Do I know myself to behave this way in different situations? And again, we want to be holistic. So it can be, at work, in our social circles, in our, intimate circles, and really start to see, okay, when this happens, I always respond. I mean, small reaction when it's unconscious. A response is a conscious approach, but I always react this way. And this sequence of events usually happen. Either, difficult conversation escalates, or I go into a freeze mode and I become silent, I can't express myself, and we can't find resolution, right? And start with those patterns and really start to dig deeper, first into the reflection, is there a better way? Right? Is that the most efficient way? And is there a better way? And what would be that different way? And, simply start to explore different ways of being and relating and working. That's the surface level, right? Obviously, then you go deeper inside of yourself and you understand what created that pattern and what's the root cause of it and how you can actually transform it.
And I'm curious.
So there is a piece of, yeah.
No, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, are there any things that you see that come up consistently among your clients that you work with?
Yeah. So I would say for a lot of senior executives in the corporate world, there is very often a disconnect between the head and the heart, right? So there is this mask that we wear a lot in the corporate world where we have to show up in a certain way. We have to, not show emotions. And in high flying environments, this is even more amplified. And what happens is that a lot of people have kind of learned to disconnect themselves from their emotions or to numb their emotions. And ultimately, they reach a point where they don't feel anything anymore. So they don't really feel joy. They don't feel negative emotions, but they don't feel positive emotions neither, right? So this is something that we see happening quite often. And this is, the birthplace of starting to dig into emotional intelligence. What we see a lot as well is, there is a spectrum when it comes to toxicity. And we all have that toxicity within us because our system is unhealthy, right? So it's really the acceptance of that and the willingness to look within ourselves. But we have the people on the, I would say, lower end of the narcissistic spectrum who have a tendency to be empath, and that can translate into codependent behaviors where you want to people please, you want to be liked, you are looking for outside validation. So you might find yourself having trouble saying no. You might find yourself enmeshed into unhealthy relationships. You might find yourself struggling to have boundaries or to place boundaries. And you might find yourself putting your needs last, right? And then we have people who are higher on the narcissistic spectrum, and those people, can display behaviors that are also toxic, right, on the higher end of the spectrum, which can involve, dishonesty, power games, intimidation, domination, manipulation, and those translates in loads of different behaviors. But those people would most of the time play the tyrant when it comes to conflict. So it's very difficult to have conversations with them. It's very difficult to share your perspective with them. So those are the the two polarities, and then we have a lot in the middle. Yeah.
So if we go back to, I think it was one of your first ones, talking about joy, right? Where they can't feel joy, they don't feel pleased with anything, nothing gets them excited. What would you recommend to these people as tools or things to have in their toolkit, so to speak, to be able to incorporate joy and feel joy? Because I mean, we spend so much of our life, in relationships, whether it's work or personal, that to lose joy seems really quite sad.
It is, yeah. I mean, as always with consciousness work, there are some tools for every level of depth that you can work on. So it's difficult to, just share some tools like that. But what I would say is that when you are finding yourself in that situation, most of the time you have shut your heart down. So it's really first understanding that the heart is a muscle and it needs to be practiced, it needs to be exercised. And so if we block ourselves from feeling negative emotions, we're going to block ourselves from feeling positive emotions. So the first step is really to give ourselves permissions to feel again, which is where a lot of people are like, oh my God, am I going to feel, really bad emotions all at once? and most likely you won't. I've never seen that, but yeah, you will start to feel sadness, you will start to feel anger, you will start to feel potentially shame or guilt or fear, right? And it's really that willingness to stay with these emotions, which is when the toolbox appears, right? Because with each emotion, each individual is gonna have different needs in how to support themselves through feeling these emotions, and really see what the emotions are teaching us. What's the lesson? What needs to change? Do I need to have a conversation? Do I need to say something? Do I need to have a specific action in order to honor my emotion? In terms of the tools, everything that is linked to the emotional body is around frequency and vibration, right? So emotion is energy in motion. So we're looking at any form of exercise, any form of meditation, connection with nature, music, things that allow you to be with yourself, but also to release the emotional surplus in a way.
Wow, super interesting. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about it and where I fit in, right? Because we always think about it and the people around us and how does this fit in and how can it help? And I go back to, because we're talking about folks and being a resource for a business, I'm wondering if you might be able to share one or two stories. You don't have to name any names, but how this has positively impacted somebody in their journey to build a business.
Yeah. Well, the impact is massive because when we work with individuals, our model around conscious leadership stands firmly on three pillars, which are clarity, presence, and creation. So clarity is self-awareness, but it's knowing the self, knowing how you function best, what are your triggers, what are your patterns, but also what you want and how you're going to go about it. And presence is linked to emotional mastery, emotional regulation, emotional agility. So of course, it's a lot about emotional intelligence. But how can I show up with a presence that is going to be the presence that I need and the best presence I can have? And then creation involves strategic intelligence, intuitive intelligence, systemic intelligence. It's really the place where actually we execute what we know to be true with the appropriate emotional presence. So those three pillars are crucial, and they are all, they should all have the same value. So like we should spend a third of our time on each pillar, but most people spend most of their time in the creation mode, right? So there is a lot of doing, and there is not much reflection or, just vision in a way. And so when individuals and especially founders, entrepreneurs start to understand that, they start to have the ability to be much clearer in the steps that they have to take in their business, like making the right choice at the right time as an entrepreneur is a key to success, right? I'm sure all of us as entrepreneurs have, fallen for the magic island, or I'm going to do this and it's going to work out, to realize that it's not the right thing to do. So, this kind of preparation to get into clarity. What's my intention? Why am I doing that? What's the outcome? What are the steps that I need to take? What do I need to level up within myself in order to be able to become the person I need to be for my creation to be a success, right? So that has a huge impact in the clarity, but also in regulating ourselves. If you are subject to, moods that kind of evolve throughout the day, and your work is going to suffer from it. So the more we can master our energy, the more we can master our focus and our performance. And also it makes us much more efficient when we are with other individuals, when we have to make a deal or negotiate or interact with clients and prospects. We have to know how to control our energy, and we have to also have this intuitive intelligence that allows us to read the energy of other people so we can adapt, we can pivot, we can be agile.
I think that's really interesting. And I think about the impact of one's energy on somebody else. whether it's enthusiasm, whether it's hate, whether it's shame, all those things impact people. So for example, if I'm overly enthusiastic and somebody's like, wow, that's a lot of energy, right?
Yeah.
Or you're saying something like, or you're frustrated, and it's not at them, but we're frustrated with whatever's going on at the moment. I'm wondering, consciously, what is the best way to address that so you have the least impact on somebody else? Because when you're with people, right, when you're with your team and you're getting frustrated, you want to be mindful of, how you communicate that frustration or that, etc. Right? So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because energy can be felt. So, if your boss is angry, he might not say anything, but you will feel it, right? And so, as you know, the more we level up within our own business or within an organization, the more we have to have this ability to regulate ourselves so that we can come back to center, right? I talk a lot about emotional neutrality, which is coming back to that place of 0 point where we can actually think properly, right? So it's very important to start thinking and putting some time and effort and energy and eventually money in that capacity for self-regulation. So, emotional intelligence is something that we can teach, but it's more than anything something that needs to be practiced. So whenever you're feeling a negative emotion, the first thing to do is to take a step back and acknowledge that you are feeling a negative emotion and to start to regulate your physical body because, our physiology is going to reflect what we are feeling. So when we are scared or when we feel under attack and we go into those fight or flight modes, our heart rate is going to be faster. Some parts of our brain are going to be, less flooded with blood. And we might have sweaty palms, we might shake, all of those things, right? So all of these are indicators that something is happening emotionally. And we can use our physical body to start regulating ourselves in the short term, which is breathing, right? Breath is free, breath is always available, and breath works. So just taking 3 long breaths and recognizing that I am emotionally triggered. Okay, I pause. And the second thing I say very often is like, don't say anything, don't do anything until you come back to that place of emotional centeredness, right? Because most likely, if you say or do anything, it's going to be charged emotionally and it's not going to be shared in the best way possible. Right? So it will potentially create more emotional drama. It will potentially escalate, or it will create misunderstandings, and it might trigger other people into, defense mechanisms. So this is the first place to start. Pause, breathe, and do your emotional work so that when you write that email or when you have that conversation, you can do it from a place of, emotional centeredness.
I think that's a really useful tool for a lot of people. I know myself, I always take a minute or I write the email, draft it, and then wait, and then put a softer touch on it and reestablish the relationship and, try to connect.
Yeah.
Because I know that I can't send this right now. Like if I write it right now, I'll be upset, right? Or I'm just going to be very curt. So, but if you go to the flip side, right? You could see something and it's amazing and you have a lot of energy that comes from this. And somebody's like, why are you freaking out? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's their response. How do you deal with that from a conscious place? Because here one person has joy, right?
Yeah.
Right? And it's whether it's about a new business or like a great idea you just came up with. And somebody's like, they're thinking you're freaking out, but like really you had that aha moment or something. Do you get what I'm saying?
It does. No, I do. And, it's this, this kind of judgment of being too much by other people, right? And conscious leadership is, one of the foundations of the philosophy is really to get to a place where you know yourself. What does it mean to know yourself? It also means that I accept myself, right? So the things that I don't really like, I can choose to change them or I can choose to accept them. And the more we do this work, the more we get to a place of self-acceptance and self-love, right? And so I am like this. And actually, if I'm full of joy and full of enthusiasm and full of excitement, and I decide that I choose to accept and love myself for being that person, because I think it's fantastic to actually display some enthusiasm, then I'm just going to own it, and if some people are uncomfortable by it, that's their problem, that's not mine.
I like that. I do, because I feel like oftentimes people get enthusiastic, oh my God, I figured it out, or whatever, and then there's this opposing or viewpoint that just makes the individual feel like maybe they should go inwards, or they made a mistake, or, I'm always trying to cultivate a place where you can say anything. And because I want people to be able to speak up and feel free about that. But I remember, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was not quite as confident or didn't have as much wisdom, etc., that I was very scared to raise my hand, so to speak, or share my thing, because it was going to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So
but that's also, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I think about this in terms of people building businesses and having young people and able to cultivate a place where they can come in, feel safe, share what they have because they have a different perspective, not feel shamed about it. And I don't want them to, and I wouldn't want anybody to lose their enthusiasm for it equally, even if it's not something we choose. It doesn't matter.
No, definitely. And, part of researching consciousness and implementing that into organization is also, researching on the topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, how do we create a successful, inclusive culture, and how do we fail? And what's the power of unlocking, the power, how do we unlock the power of diversity? And clearly, if we are not welcoming of everybody's identity and emotions and the way they are, and we want everybody to be the same and to kind of level everybody, we are not going to benefit from, the great opportunities of inclusion, which is that different perspective that create, collaboration, co-creation, innovation. So it's very important to cultivate that. And one of the things that we love about the young generation is that they have energy, they and yeah, they can get enthusiastic about things, and so it's really about welcoming all of that. Of course, we need some systems and some processes and some tools so that there is a framework, and there are some code in a way, but the idea really is to accept people as they are, and to welcome their strengths and help them amplify them, to work on their weaknesses. But enthusiasm is, for me, is not something that I would want to reduce in anyone.
Squash in any way, right? Yeah, completely agree. And I think about your point about cultural being, culturally, I want to say competent or culturally aware, because, if you live in New York and you live in Singapore, our cultures are different, right? The way that we do business is different. Even from New York to California, it's very different. And I think it's really interesting how our energy has to shift accordingly, to be able to connect with those on that level. And I think it's very conscious that you're doing that. So I think that what you're saying really resonates with me, and I hope that it also equally resonates with our listeners and viewers today, because if we've sparked a little interest in people and how they're building their businesses and how they can look inward, I think if they find as much interest as I did, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of ways to grow. And I think that it's only going to improve ourselves professionally and personally. So I love that you're doing this research, and I loved learning more about this. And I can't wait to continue this conversation another day, but I'm so grateful that you were able to join so we could provide this resource for our guests and our community, really. And it's in saying that, if our community, if somebody from the community, somebody listening, somebody watching wanted to learn more or get in touch, what would be the best way?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website, consciousleadership.org, where you have a lot of complementary resources. So, there is a free masterclass, some free meditations. There are also, we send a digest every month, which is full of, advice and valuable content. So you can sign up for that. And you can also reach out to us. We have a contact form. So if you would like to know more, have a conversation, of course, it's a business, but more than anything, it's a community and it's a movement. So, feel free to connect with us. You can also find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Marika Messager. And also in those two places, we share loads of content. So, yeah. A lot for you. If you want to know more, there is a lot out there that we provide. And, we are always very happy to have conversations with people who are interested.
And we'll make sure to include all of that in the show notes for folks, the Instagram, the LinkedIn, etc. So Marika, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for sharing your research and your insight and what you're working on. And on a personal level, I can't wait to learn more. So thank you.
Thank you, Justine. It was a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks for digging in. To learn more about these stories, you can access the show notes at nextgenpurpose.com/podcast. If you like what you just heard, head to Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening to hit subscribe and leave us a review. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at essential.ingredients and check out our weekly newsletter for your dose of food industry info. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel for videocasts of each episode and give this episode a like while you're there. You can also connect with me directly at justine.reichman on Instagram and The Real Justine Reichman on TikTok. See you next week.